Yeah, so the reason we got connected is because John and I have a partnership, and John had been working with you to set up some of his legal structure. And we realized that at the time, I had six LLCs, and all six, if you looked up the owner, had my personal name attached to them. And so we went and filed amendments to create a holding company to own them all so that I have some level of anonymity in order to, not to say that a single LLC is going to ruin you. I mean, I've been in a lawsuit and they weren't able to pierce the corporate veil. I was okay, but it's still a little odd to be like, "Oh no, I don't own that," and they're like, "Well, your name's on it." So, I mean, that's how we got tied in. I guess you want to talk a little bit about like the difference between, like, I guess like what you might consider like level one asset protection and two or three, or if there's like a breakout for that, or I mean, obviously it's different from everyone, but maybe just kind of break through like we mentioned LLCs, we mentioned holding companies, we mentioned trusts, like kind of some general guidelines for when those might be applicable to people.
For sure. Yeah, there was a study that came out that said there's 76 new lawsuits filed every minute, right? So you can't avoid getting sued. That's just, it's a sue happy world that we're living in. Very litigious society. It is what it is. But the more successful you get, the larger the target on your back becomes. So if you can protect yourself, part of the anonymity piece is if somebody slips and falls, one of the top reasons for lawsuits, you don't want them to see your name and your address where they can come serve you at your house, or a disgruntled tenant can come show up at your door, right? It's okay if it's not like something you have to do, but everyone's tolerance level is going to be a little bit different. So being aware of what your risks are, I feel like is half the battle, right? So having that protection is great. Go ahead.
I'm so sorry to, like, the way you're implying, which I think you're implying that it's a bit of a war of attrition. Like, just make it, like, make it difficult. If you make it more difficult for people to sue you, then you will get less lawsuits.
Well said. 100%.
That's so fascinating. Regardless of the actual legal liability, just like being a pain to do is what is the part of the process or part of the protection.
I mean, it's just like working out, right? It's hard, so a lot of people don't do it. Those that do end up getting those results, right? It's the same concept.
Yeah. No, it makes perfect sense. I suppose it's like kind of obvious now that I'm saying it, but I guess I don't know. I never really sat and thought about it like that way. Like, if you just like, hey, it's regardless of the actual liability, like, I'm just going to make this a nightmare for you, and then you're going to go away.
I mean, it makes sense. If I'm an attorney and someone comes to me and they're like, "I want to sue this guy, and he owns the house I am renting, free and clear under his own name." Cool, let's go after him. But if it's like 7 different LLCs and a trust fund, and the house only has its 85% loan to value on a first position lien, it's like, not really worth going after that thing.
The goal is to build wealth, but to look as broke as possible on paper. And there's a fine line between, now I'm just overcomplicating this and this is ridiculous and it's costing me more money to file my taxes because I have things that I don't need. We don't want to do that either. We want to keep it simple and keep it easy. But a lot of times just giving yourself one extra layer of protection is enough to make sure you're protected and not show where you live.
Yeah, I am rethinking my strategy now because I've been fairly cavalier. And to be fair, when I started, right, to your earlier point, I was like, look, I'm just some broke dude who bought one house. That was a foreclosure that we spent like 50 grand, right? Like, there's nothing, sue me. Like, I have nothing still. And then real estate's interesting. I don't know if you've heard of this thing called appreciation. And so all these cheap houses that I bought are now worth something. And now I got a bunch of them in low equity and low debt. And I'm like, oh, my name's on all this stuff. And it didn't matter before. Now I'm like having this conversation with you. I'm like, oh, you know what? This might matter now. But it's interesting how, you go from, playing business owner where I'm a guy like with a theoretical, business to now, you end up. And I think a lot of people do that. They go off and they do the LLC and the business cards and they play business owner first and they have no income and they have no assets. And then next thing you know, you have some stuff that you need to protect. And it's like a gun, right? You can't buy it once the guy breaks in. You got to do this in advance.
Yeah, there's probably some listeners listening to this that are like, show up at my house, do me a favor, right? But it's everyone's different, right? No, I'm just joking with that, but it's make sure you're protected, show yourself, protect the assets that you're working hard for, but also separate the liability from what you've worked for personally. Bank accounts, cars, retirement accounts should be business 101 says separate your personal and your business. And I appreciate you saying it the way that you did, because a lot of people that come to us are that way. Like, we're not qualified to work with you yet. How much money do I need to make to work with you? And we work with people even before they're getting started in their business ventures. The more you know, the easier it is to get there.